several months. The wife very often is pregnant when she comes, or she's recently delivered, they have a little baby with them. And then when we go on and do the investigations, we find this man has, he has tuberculosis, which can be quite easily diagnosed by doing a sputum examination and a chest x-ray. But also that he has HIV infection. And then this, of course, leads to a lot of, a huge impact, first of all, on this person. Sometimes they are willing to share it with their wife, sometimes they are not willing. They face a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, a lot of denial, all kinds of emotions that he goes through. But we usually try and convince the person as quickly as possible to disclose to his wife. There are lots of issues here about testing, about disclosure. There are human rights issues. You can't test somebody for HIV without taking their consent. Similarly, you can't also tell somebody, even though it may be his wife, without his consent. So we have to go through all this counseling, talking to them, and so on. And the typical scenario is, we test the wife, she's positive, and more often than not, the child is positive as well. So this is something when you start seeing day in and day out, it becomes very depressing. And the other kind of scenario is this man then dies, or he's coming too late and it's too late for treatment and he doesn't respond to treatment. And then you have this young widow who's 19 or 20 years old. And what was her risk factor? Why did she get HIV? Her only risk was to get married. And in India, the majority of marriages are still arranged marriages. And so she listened to her parents and she got married to this man who was chosen for her. And she's ended up at the age of 20 or 21 with HIV infection and a whole very bleak future. So this disease is not a medical disease really. It's more of a social disease. It's not just the drugs that you need. It's a whole lot more. You need, first of all, an environment that will accept you. And very often what happens is the stigma of HIV is so much and the denial is so much that usually what will happen, the husband's family, they'll refuse to accept that their son could have done anything wrong. So the first thing would be how to blame the woman, how to blame the daughter-in-law. And then if the son dies, then she's out of the household. And given the economic background that most of these people come from, it's very difficult for the woman to go back to her mother's house as well, because they are an equally desperate economic situation. And so for them to take on a woman who's HIV positive, maybe with children, and to support her, it all becomes too much. So the easy way out is not to accept. So again, very often these women are left with nowhere to go, neither to their parents nor to the in-laws. They may or may not be educated or be capable of having a job. So what they really need is for somebody to be there with them and to support them, to see that they can earn something and support themselves and their children. And so we find that in our clinics we actually spend a lot of time just talking to people and also to work with NGOs and with other organizations to see that these people are brought out of the desperate state in which they come when they are first diagnosed. They are practically suicidal because they really don't know which way to turn. And then if they can be helped out of that situation, given some ways of empowering themselves to earn a living for themselves, maybe some kind of training, opportunities to earn a livelihood, then most of them do really well. I mean, women are real fighters, and so I've seen such wonderful spirit. Particularly they have children that they have to look after and support, and there's a real will to live and a will to be well and to take care of themselves. So it's a very close nexus between poverty, between tuberculosis, between HIV and malnutrition. All these go hand in hand, and so we have now all these governments promising to make antiretroviral treatment, which is the drugs for HIV, available, universal access, they say, by 2010. The WHO first launched this 3x5 program, where they said that 3 million people with HIV should be treated by 2005. This was launched in 2003 at a time when very, very few people in the developing countries had access to drugs. Even India, even though we were making and exporting these drugs to other countries, we didn't have a government program to treat people with HIV till 2004. Well, since 2004, things have got better, but still we have 54 ART centers for a huge country like India. That's not enough. There are 35,000 people on treatment now with free antiretroviral drugs from the government hospitals, but there are estimated 500,000 people who need treatment. So the gap is very wide. People have to travel long distances still to access ART, and when they don't have income and they don't have food to eat, it's really very difficult to make them take drugs on a regular basis. So the challenges we faced with TB treatment was for 6 months, and it was difficult to make people complete 6 months of treatment because of these things, because of the economic compulsion of going back to work and earning, and food becomes a priority rather than taking medicine. Now this is a lifelong treatment we're talking about for HIV, and so if you have to have people on treatment and keep well, then we have to ensure that they have a means of supporting themselves. So even though this scenario may look very depressing, when you think about it, but so much has been achieved in the last few years, and a lot more can be done. And I think that's where people like you all come into the picture, civil society, groups like Results. Advocacy and activism is so important. At this AIDS conference, we see a lot of examples of people who are really speaking out and telling governments what they should be doing, and saying, well, just stop all this, double speak and hypocritical things, and just get down and do what you're supposed to do. And there were some figures put up about the amount that is spent on the Iraq and Afghanistan war, with hundreds of billions of dollars that the United States is spending on supporting wars in these countries. And just, not even 1/10 of that is enough probably to treat thousands and thousands of people across the world. So when you really see things like this happening, there's so much of injustice, so much money is being spent on wars, and not enough, to raise the spending from 0.2 to 0.7%, for example, is such a challenge, where actually you find that, there is a lot of money available. So I think if people like you advocate, you raise your voices, try to be heard at as many places as possible, I think that together we can make a big difference. Thank you all very much.
Run overseas. So another doctor, we have Dr. David Hawkins, who's worked with the Toronto Calcutta Foundation and has been over to Calcutta, and is someone who's working on national guidelines in regards to how to treat HIV and AIDS. So we welcome comments from Dr. Hawkins.
Pleasure to be there.